Life has a way of surprising us, often in the most painful and unexpected ways. What starts as a dream can quickly unravel into a nightmare, leaving us grappling with emotions we never thought we'd have to face. In my relationship with Kara, I thought I had everything, a loving partner and a future filled with promise. But what I uncovered one day shattered that illusion, leading me down a path of betrayal, heartbreak, and a thirst for revenge that consumed my every thought. This is the story of how one discovery changed everything. Michael's confrontation, a turning point in life. In a tense courtroom atmosphere, Judge Marie Matthews delivered her verdict, granting Wanda Nan the use of their family home until their children graduated from high school. Mr. Nan would continue to handle the mortgage and utility payments, while Wanda would also receive half the value of his business. In a move that further tilted the scales in Wanda's favor, the judge awarded her 60% of all marital assets, including bank accounts, investments, and retirement accounts. Custody of the children was granted to Wanda, with standard visitation rights for Mr. Nan, 2 consecutive weeks during the summer and every other weekend. Child support was set at $750 per month for each child, totaling $1,500 monthly. Considering Wanda's 5-year absence from the workforce, the judge also mandated an additional $2,000 per month in spousal support. With the divorce finalized in 90 days unless Mr. Nan withdrew his petition, the proceedings felt surreal. As Judge Matthews began to rise, I blurted out a single word that would ripple through the coming months of my life. "Contempt," I said defiantly, challenging her authority. "If you're struggling to grasp the meaning of the term, I'd be more than happy to offer a definition." In that moment, the courtroom fell silent. Judge Matthews froze, her head snapping in my direction as disbelief washed over her face. She seemed unable to comprehend that someone would dare utter such a word in her presence. Slowly, she returned to her seat, her expression morphing from shock to pure fury. Once she regained her composure, the icy glare she shot my way could have frozen the sun. "Don't think I'm naive," she hissed, her voice low and threatening. "You have 1 minute to apologize, or I will cite you for contempt of court." I couldn't help but respond, "At least you got one ruling right today." I expressed my contempt for the entire situation, and my lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently in my ear, frantically rifling through his briefcase as if searching for a way to silence me. In retaliation, Judge Matthews struck her gavel again, her patience waning. "Let's see how much contempt you can muster after 30 days in jail," she threatened. "Why not make it 60 days?" I shot back tauntingly. "Do you want to try for more? I think if you took a little time to relax, you wouldn't be such a hard-nosed person." Extending my right hand with my middle finger raised, I mirrored the gesture with my left hand, suggesting she should find a way to unwind and let go of the rigid persona she had adopted. In my eyes, she was in greater need of a change than anyone I had ever encountered. As I reflected on the escalating tension, I wondered if someone had called emergency services. I considered 2 possibilities. Either she was teetering on the brink of a stroke, or her head was about to explode. The smoke from her ears wasn't visible, but I had never seen a face turn such an alarming shade of red after my outburst. She was clearly furious and sentenced me to 90 days in jail. Her voice took on a nearly demonic quality as the bailiffs moved in to escort me out. My lawyer wore a pained expression, while the courtroom buzzed with shock as I couldn't contain my laughter. Perhaps this was some sort of psychological reaction, I wasn't sure, but it seemed ridiculous in the face of such gravity. The following day, I received a letter from my lawyer's firm stating they were dropping me as a client. While I wasn't surprised, it left me feeling more isolated. You might be wondering how I ended up in such a precarious situation. A bit of background might help clarify things. My name is Michael Nan, and I'm currently 31 years old. I was born to a lovely middle-class couple in the heartland of America, raised with traditional values that emphasized a strong sense of right and wrong. I was taught to respect those who deserved it and to uphold my word, because when you made a promise, it truly meant something. The principles instilled in me included hard work, generosity, and living up to my values. The golden rule was paramount: treat others how you wish to be treated. However, most people often overlook the flip side of that principle: Treat others as they have treated you. While Christianity encourages turning the other cheek, I have never been particularly adept at that. I have a stubborn streak, which often clashes with my sense of justice. When I believe someone has wronged me, I become resolute in my pursuit of vindication. There was one notable incident during high school involving Cheryl H. Haskins. We had been dating for a couple of months when a minor argument led to what I'll call our breakup. It was understood that this separation was temporary. We would typically apologize and reunite within a few days. However, one Saturday evening, while walking past the theater, I spotted my cousin Harold escorting Cheryl inside. Harold and I were more like brothers than mere cousins, practically inseparable since childhood. His family lived just down the block, and we had grown up together. I also knew he had a crush on Cheryl. While he was aware of our temporary breakup, he also knew we would likely reconcile after the weekend. From that moment on, he was dead to me. When Cheryl tried to talk to me the following Monday, I completely ignored her. At church that Sunday, when Harold approached me, I simply stared at him, refusing to speak. Once he finished talking, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him behind. This experience reinforced my belief that loyalty should never be compromised, especially among friends and family. In my mind, there were lines that should never be crossed, and Harold had shattered that trust. Little did I know, these events were only the beginning of a series of challenges that would shape my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. When Harold came over for Sunday dinner, I couldn't bring myself to even look at him. The tension was palpable. He tried to engage with me, making an effort to play video games together, but I wasn't having any of it. Frustrated, I simply stopped playing and retreated to my room, seeking solace away from the awkwardness. My parents made several attempts to bridge the gap, urging me to talk to him, but my resolve remained unbroken. Even a year later, after I had inadvertently taken his girlfriend from him, I still refused to engage with him. Sure, I confronted him when he called me out on the whole girlfriend situation, and I didn't hesitate to smack him for his audacity, but that was the extent of our interaction. Years later, I received an invitation to his wedding, which I promptly ignored. When I married Wanda, I made sure every single one of my extended family members got an invitation. Everyone except Harold. Maybe it makes me sound petty, but I'm not one to let go of a grudge easily. When someone wrongs me, I hold on to that bitterness unless it's clear it was an honest mistake. What Harold and Cheryl did was calculated, and that's what stings the most. You might think I'm being unreasonable, and maybe I am, but let me elaborate a bit more. I strongly believe that if you commit a crime, you should be prepared to face the consequences. If you're reckless enough to drive under the influence and get caught, you should expect to lose your license and face higher insurance premiums, maybe even community service. If your job hinges on your driving, then be prepared to lose that job. I call this a foolish tax. Similarly, if a girl chooses to engage in unprotected sex and ends up pregnant at 18, her foolish tax is becoming a mother at a young age. And if a guy irresponsibly gets his prom date pregnant, he should step up and take responsibility for his actions. Choices have consequences, and that's what personal responsibility is all about. I refuse to pay the price for someone else's mistakes. That philosophy drove me through high school. I worked diligently, maintained solid grades, and earned some great scholarships. My college years went smoothly, where I balanced academics and a vibrant social life, dating various girls while still excelling in my studies. I was often told I was good-looking, and I worked hard to stay fit and healthy. Sure, I found myself in more than a few fights over my beliefs, but I won more than I lost, which helped bolster my confidence. I graduated with a degree in economics and a minor in accounting, later earning my MBA. Upon entering the corporate world, I landed a decent job at a large firm and quickly found my footing. I also discovered a knack for the stock market, making some wise investments that paid off handsomely. It wasn't long before I met Wanda at a party. We hit it off immediately, and I asked her out on a date. From that moment on, our relationship blossomed. Wanda was stunning. There's no other way to put it. It's a classic cliché, but I truly believe that beauty is subjective. While she might not fit everyone's idea of beauty, to me, she was absolutely perfect. Whenever we went out, heads turned and my friends would constantly comment on how they'd swoop in if we ever broke up. Even some of my female friends joked about trying to win her over if she became available. Eventually, I proposed, and thankfully she said yes. It's worth mentioning that Wanda went to college too. I often tease her about getting her Mrs. degree, a humorous nod to the idea of girls attending college just to find a husband. Though she didn't actually earn one, she did graduate with a degree in art history, which prepared her for her job as a barista at Starbucks. For those who might not know, an MR's degree humorously refers to a woman who goes to college with the primary goal of marrying someone and securing a stable future. Wanda left her job just a week before our wedding to become a full-time homemaker. Our married life was blissful. We settled into a beautiful 3-bedroom home. I was thriving at work, and my stock market ventures were paying off. While we weren't living extravagantly, we managed to save a significant amount of money. I funneled my bonuses into our investments and maxed out my 401k contributions, aiming to retire before I hit 40 so I could truly savor life. A few years into our marriage, I returned home one Friday evening to find Wanda looking dazzling, a huge smile plastered across her face. "Hurry up and get showered and changed. We're going out to celebrate tonight, Daddy," she exclaimed. My heart raced. Did she just call me Daddy? I was taken aback, but it was a pleasant surprise. We had been trying to conceive for a while, so while I was thrilled, I was also surprised that it had finally happened. Scooping her into my arms, I spun her around, showering her with kisses. I knew we'd have to tone down our celebrations once the baby arrived, but that night, we lit up the town. The following months were filled with excitement as we prepared for our new addition. Then came another surprise. Twins. We were having 2 little girls. I couldn't wait to spoil them and turn them into my little daddy's girls. The day of their birth was exhilarating. We rushed to the hospital, and a few hours later, we welcomed 2 beautiful, healthy baby girls into the world. They were perfect, with 10 fingers and 10 toes. Due to being twins, they needed to stay in the hospital a bit longer than usual, but everything turned out just fine. When we finally brought them home, our families gathered to celebrate our new arrivals. I noticed my mom gazing at her granddaughters with pure joy, perhaps because I had finally given her the grandchildren she'd been longing for. Life shifted dramatically for us. Realizing that my job was keeping me away from my family too much, I decided it was time for a change. After years of careful investing and navigating the stock market, I finally decided it was time to take the plunge and form my own investment company. I had a knack for understanding the nuances of finance and had been successfully helping friends and family manage their portfolios. With that foundation, I obtained the necessary licenses and opened my own investment firm. It felt like a natural progression. After all, I was already advising a handful of clients on the side. Once I officially launched my business, a wave of support came in from my network. Several former coworkers transferred their accounts to me, and soon I had built a respectable client list. Word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied clients began to trickle in, and it seemed like everything was on an upward trajectory. But as they say, when you're on top of the world, the only way to go is down. It was my daughter's 2nd birthday party, and we had gone all out to celebrate. Sure, she wouldn't remember it in the years to come, but we wanted her to have a video to look back on, capturing the joy of her special day. Family from both sides had gathered, and laughter echoed throughout the house as we all enjoyed the festivities. Just as I was about to emerge from the bedroom after a quick bathroom break, I overheard my mom chatting with her sister in the hallway. Their conversation took a sharp turn when my mom mentioned how puzzled she was about where those striking blue eyes of my daughters had come from. "Maybe you should ask him," her sister suggested, and my heart sank as I felt the implications of that comment. My mom replied, her voice laced with concern, "I can't imagine what would happen if he found out they weren't his. He seems so happy right now, it would probably devastate him." I couldn't bear to hear more. I quietly backed away and locked the bathroom door behind me, the weight of their words crushing me. I needed to think. The girls had to be mine, right? Surely someone in our families must have blue eyes. My own eyes were a muddled brown, while Wanda's were a warm hazel. I mentally scrolled through images of my relatives, searching for anyone who might have blue eyes. The only person I could think of was my cousin Mary, whose bright green eyes came from her non-biological father. As for Wanda's family, I couldn't recall anyone with blue eyes on her side either. Realizing I had to pull myself together and return to the party before anyone noticed my absence, I took a deep breath. I plastered a cheerful smile on my face and rejoined the celebration, though the unease within me simmered just beneath the surface. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house had quieted down, I tucked the girls into bed, scrutinizing their features closely. Some of them resembled Wanda, while others felt foreign to me. I found no definitive similarities that I could claim as my own. The next day, while Wanda was napping with the girls, I took a step that felt both bold and terrifying. I ordered supplies for my office, using a company credit card to keep the invoices hidden from her. At the same time, I began researching local private investigation firms, my suspicion that Wanda had cheated on me nearly 3 years ago now becoming an insistent whisper in my mind. If she had been unfaithful, I needed proof, and if she was still involved in any kind of infidelity, I had to know. A few days later, the supplies I ordered arrived, and I had also met with a private investigation company called Pro Investigations. I provided them with all the necessary information, granting them access to Wanda's cell phone, tablet, and laptop. Concurrently, I initiated some strategic financial moves to protect my assets. If Wanda was innocent and the girls were genuinely mine, then my actions would prove to be unnecessary. But if my instincts were correct, I was not about to fund someone else's infidelity or the upbringing of children that might not be mine. 2 weeks later, I received a letter at my office. After locking the door behind me, I opened it and felt my world crash down around me. I cried for an hour as the reality sank in. The girls were not biologically mine. Deep down, I had suspected it all along, but I had clung to the hope that it wasn't true. The following day, my private investigator met with me, laying out all the evidence he had gathered. Wanda was still involved with her personal trainer, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man, meeting him a couple of times a week and even taking the girls to his apartment. The audio recordings confirmed their awareness of the biological truth, shattering my heart into a million pieces. The next afternoon, I consulted a divorce lawyer. Though his conventional advice leaned toward a quick filing, I prioritized the well-being of my daughters and insisted on preparing the divorce documents without rushing to file them. It took 2 months of meticulous planning during which I ensured I had zero net income and assets on paper before making my move. When the day finally came, I left Wanda, surprised to see my cousin Howard and his wife Cheryl show up that weekend. I explained to them that Howard and Cheryl had come to visit me in my office a few weeks back. After some serious discussions, they acknowledged their wrongdoing and offered sincere apologies. I felt it was time to let things go. You might think I reconciled with Howard and Cheryl, and while they did come to see me and apologize, I couldn't help but overlook a couple of significant details, coincidences that left me uneasy. Cheryl's family was known for skirting the law. Some members were large and intimidating, not shying away from the occasional brawl. There were even whispers, though mostly gossip, that some might work as enforcers for a local gang of unsavory businessmen. Just a couple of days before Howard and Cheryl's visit, there was a shocking news story about a personal trainer at a local gym who had been brutally mugged shortly after leaving work. He had foolishly tried to fight off 5 attackers and ended up with a broken jaw, a shattered nose, broken ribs, a broken arm, a dislocated kneecap, and ruptured testicles. He would be in the hospital for at least a few weeks. The police struggled to address the crime wave in town, and since the assailants wore dark clothing, gloves, and ski masks, no suspects had been identified. Doctors expected the blonde-haired, blue-eyed victim to fully recover after reconstructive surgery and extensive physical therapy, although engaging in intimacy might be out of the question for some time. The whole incident cast a long shadow over everything, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the world was closing in around me. With my life and family crumbling, I was left to navigate the aftermath of betrayal and deception, wondering what my future, and that of my daughters, would look like. In a couple of months, he would find out that his car had been taken to a chop shop, his credit cards maxed out, his bank accounts drained, and his identity stolen, leading to a long, arduous journey through legal battles as his personal information was sold on the dark web. Surprisingly, Wanda was inconsolable for about a week after the mugging, likely worried about the rising crime rates in the city. Despite my repeated offers to enhance our home security, she remained on edge. By Monday morning, I instructed my lawyer to finalize the divorce paperwork and file it, aiming to serve her by Friday afternoon. My lawyer tried to persuade me to reconsider my approach, but I stood my ground. By Tuesday, the forms were ready for my review and signature. When I met him at his office to go over everything, he reiterated his concerns about my decisions. After some thought, I decided to humor him, agreeing to give Wanda the house and even including the investments. However, I made it clear that I wouldn't pay a dime beyond that. If she chose to keep the house, she would be responsible for the mortgage and utilities. Notably, there hadn't been a single cent in the investment accounts for over a month. I had no issue giving her 100% of zero. In the meantime, I was relocating all my tools and equipment from the garage, gradually moving out items I wanted to keep, primarily from my home office. My larger belongings found storage on Howard and Cheryl's ranch, while smaller, less valuable items were transferred to a one-bedroom apartment in a complex owned by an offshore LLC. The owners of that LLC were surprisingly challenging to locate and verify. Finally, Friday morning arrived, and I headed to work as usual. A couple of days earlier, I had enlisted Howard's help to move my truck to the office. I left my car behind and drove the pickup to the bank. There, I drained all my accounts, leaving a mere $100 in checking and savings. Next, I emptied the safety deposit box, then drove to the ranch to combine all the cash and the contents of the safety deposit box with my other belongings. I didn't want them discovering a newly rented box at another bank and seizing it, nor did I want to risk anyone tracing a wire transfer. Plus, I anticipated needing the cash later. You might be wondering why I trusted Howard and Cheryl. It was simple. The mortgage on their ranch was held by a certain offshore LLC with murky ownership. Despite our family issues, Howard was still family, and you don't mess with family. The rest of the family took such matters personally, and there was much joy when Howard and I finally reconciled. Returning home late that morning, I pulled over a couple of blocks away to check the GPS I had installed on Wanda's car. As expected, she was at the mall, rushing home. I parked in the driveway and began to execute my plan. Over the past few days, I had packed up the remainder of my clothes and belongings, placing them in the garage. I tossed a few boxes into the truck, then went inside to grab the last of my clothes from the closet and dresser, not bothering to pack them neatly, just grabbing them by the armful, hangers and all. It only took a couple of trips to toss everything into the cab of the truck. I didn't even bother to close the garage or the front door behind me. As I was leaving the house, my cell phone rang. It was Wanda, presumably calling because her cards didn't work when she tried to check out. Glancing at the GPS signal moving in my direction, I couldn't help but chuckle. I tossed my phone onto the table and walked out the door. Within minutes, I was several blocks away, arriving at my new apartment. I transferred everything from my truck into the appropriate rooms. 3 beers later, everything was put away, and as I sank back into my recliner, my new cell phone rang. Only a couple of people had this number, and Wanda was not one of them. I answered the call, and the voice on the other end informed me that Wanda had been served. They assured me I would receive the video shortly. I responded with a simple, "Okay, thank you," before hanging up. 15 minutes later, I received the video in my email. To say she was shocked would be an understatement. Unfortunately, the video only covered her being served until she dropped to the floor. The process server checked to ensure she wasn't injured before leaving, and the video concluded at that point. I would have loved to see her reaction once she started reading the divorce petition and realized I had DNA and video evidence of her infidelity. From that moment, everything moved at a glacier's pace. I received several phone calls, a few from my old office, as Wanda had called multiple times trying to reach me. Apparently, she didn't believe them when they told her I had resigned and hadn't worked there for the past 2 weeks. She even showed up in person, demanding to see me, but that didn't end well. The police had to be called to escort her off the property. Howard made a couple of calls, and soon Wanda began pressuring him to help her reach me, suspecting his sudden presence was too coincidental with my abrupt divorce. Restraining orders were filed against both my former company and Howard, compelling her to cease her pursuit. 2 weeks later, my lawyer finally contacted her to find out who her attorney was, but she hadn't hired one yet. First off, she was quickly running out of money. All she had was the cash in her purse and the $200 I had left in the bank accounts. She began leaning on her parents for financial support. I relaxed, avoiding starting any new projects and making sure to leave nothing she could take. Eventually, she got a lawyer, and meetings were scheduled. I declined to attend, giving my lawyer strict instructions, not a single penny more. Tempers flared during those meetings, leading to arbitration, which I was required to attend. However, things did not go well during the proceedings. The questions thrown around felt like a gauntlet, designed to provoke and unsettle. Each inquiry cut deeper, exposing the cracks in Wanda's carefully constructed facade. I sat there, unwavering, as her discomfort became evident, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was far from over. 2 days after being sent to the infirmary due to a well-placed 65-yard field goal to his groin, his accumulated misfortunes finally caught up with him. He refused yard exercise, choosing instead to spend most of his time in his cell. When he returned to court, facing the same stern judge, she asked if he was ready to apologize for his vile courtroom outburst. Feigning ignorance, he asked, "For what?" The judge elaborated on his previous behavior, but he shrugged it off, claiming he didn't recall the incident. Unamused, she warned him to keep his tongue in check or risk extending his stay. Clearly frustrated, he sarcastically suggested she could try stomping her feet. Perhaps she'd even need an EMT if she suffered a stroke. He then turned the conversation to his dire financial situation. "I can't pay child support, maintenance, mortgage, or utilities while I'm in here. There's no work, and to be frank, those kids aren't even mine. My ex-wife cheated on me, so why should I be the one paying for her lifestyle?" He argued further, adding that he'd given her half of his business. Surely she had plenty of money. But that's when Wanda's lawyer chimed in, explaining they'd been unable to claim her half of the business because he had sold it to an overseas entity just 2 months before filing for divorce. They were still working to determine who the actual owners were. As the lawyer spoke, a striking young woman stepped forward, introducing herself as a representative of the company's board of directors. She moved to dismiss the ruling that granted Mrs. Nen any part of the business, arguing that the sale had predated the divorce. She stressed that her company was unrelated to the case and rejected Wanda's claim to any ownership. The room buzzed with questions, one of them addressing the sale money. The representative explained that the transaction and transfer of funds had all been conducted overseas. "I'm not privy to all the details," she said, "but to my understanding, the money from the sale never entered U.S. jurisdiction, making it untouchable by U.S. laws. Any claims would need to be directed to your ex-husband, possibly in the country where the money resides." Wanda's lawyer, growing impatient, asked, "And which country would that be?" "Initially Belgium," the woman replied, "but it was transferred somewhere else shortly after the sale. I don't know where it went after that." The back and forth continued, with Wanda's lawyer growing increasingly desperate. "Her house is going into foreclosure, and the utilities are about to be shut off. My client's parents helped out at first, but it's become too much for them. She's working as a waitress at a local diner, but that's not enough to maintain the house." The judge turned to him. "You have 1 week to bring all the payments up to date." With a bitter laugh, he responded, "What would you have me do, bend over and pull money out of my pocket that doesn't exist? I'm in jail. I can't work, and I don't have access to any money. How do you expect me to comply?" His frustration was palpable. He explained that the belief he had hidden away some stash of money was a misconception. He couldn't access financial records, didn't have a lawyer, and insisted that even if there were hidden accounts, he didn't know about them. "There's no money left," he said, referring to the sale of his company. "It was sold off cheap to cover the company's debts. There's nothing left." The court remained skeptical. With a dismissive shrug, he dared them to prove otherwise. "If anyone has hidden money, it's my ex. She probably stole it while she was off with her boyfriends." Wanda's lawyer, indignant, objected to the accusation. "That doesn't make sense," the lawyer said. He shot back. "It makes as much sense as keeping me locked up in here, where I have no way to make any payments and then demanding that I pay everything off." The judge, unimpressed, asked if he was aware she could keep him in jail indefinitely until he paid. He stared at her in disbelief. "So let me get this straight. You want to keep me in a place where I can't earn money, and at the same time you expect me to pay? Brilliant plan." 3 months later, the inevitable happened. Wanda's house was foreclosed on, and she lost her luxury car due to non-payment. With no means to afford an apartment, she and her daughters moved in with her parents. Despite working 30 hours a week as a waitress, the situation was bleak. Desperate, her family pleaded with the judge to release him so he could start making payments again. Meanwhile, Wanda's lover, now out of the picture, left her to deal with the aftermath alone. Mitchell's story was one of constant challenges, but through persistence and clever planning, he managed to navigate his way through them, all while facing a looming financial crisis. After being released from the hospital, where he had undergone physical therapy, Mitchell spent countless hours each day trying but failing to resolve his financial issues. One small silver lining was the prevention of new credit cards being opened in his name, thanks to his severely diminished credit score. With only minimal car insurance coverage and a part-time job at a local gym, Mitchell's financial recovery was slow. The high deductibles and a mountain of medical bills made it feel like an endless process. Once he secured legal representation, Mitchell reached a deal with the judge for his release from jail, which allowed him to find a job and begin making payments toward his debts. However, suspicions of hidden funds and the risk of flight forced him to surrender his passport. Taking whatever work he could find, Mitchell ended up employed at Taco Bell and lived discreetly at Howard and Cheryl's ranch, fully aware that he was under constant surveillance. Despite the watchful eyes, most of his cash remained securely in his possession. This routine of living under observation continued for the next 3 months. Meanwhile, Wanda, his ex-wife, used a court order to garnish his meager wages from Taco Bell. However, the small sums yielded minimal gains for her. During this period, Mitchell and Howard devised a plan. While Mitchell had been in jail, Howard emptied his apartment, and Mitchell's belongings were shipped off to various family members. These packages were then gathered at a common location without attracting the attention of those watching him. Friends and family who visited the ranch for barbecues helped transport the packages discreetly in their vehicles over the following weeks. Mitchell stayed low-key, spending his days either working at Taco Bell or remaining at home. Wanda's constant harassment became so disruptive that Taco Bell eventually took out a restraining order against her. Despite the chaos, Mitchell managed to hold on to his job thanks to a discreet payment to the manager. His lawyer, Julia, frequently visited the ranch to meet with him. Initially, she had represented the new owners of Mitchell's former company, but she eventually became his personal attorney. Julia was tough and relentless in court, earning the nickname Barracuda for her sharp tactics. As for Mitchell's finances, he had indeed sold his firm, but not to anyone that Wanda could trace. The sale occurred overseas, ensuring that the money never entered U.S. jurisdiction. As a result, Wanda couldn't lay claim to any of it. The only way she could access the funds would be if Mitchell deposited them into a U.S. bank, but he had no intention of doing so. Instead, he kept his cash stashed away in various places, including a safe deposit box, checking and savings accounts, and a safe totaling around $200,000. He spent a portion on his plans, but still had about $150,000 in hand. The final phase of his plan was set into motion during a family barbecue. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and Mitchell helped Howard with the grill. Julia, his lawyer, was present, along with other extended family members. As the party went on, one of Cheryl's uncles approached Mitchell to thank him for helping out and handed him an envelope. Mitchell passed the envelope to Julia for safekeeping. Later that evening, Mitchell made an announcement to the gathered family and friends. The lien holder on Howard and Cheryl's ranch had declared the mortgage fully paid off, making them the outright owners. This news sparked a massive celebration, with everyone partying late into the night. As the night wound down, Julia left the party early as she had a flight to catch the next morning. Interestingly, her flight was out of an airport in the next state. She had already packed everything in her leased car when she arrived at the party. Instead of returning to her rented apartment, she drove straight to the airport. No one noticed the man who climbed out of the back of her car in the parking garage. Nor did anyone pay attention to the man who walked 50 feet behind her as they both headed toward the international terminal. Mitchell couldn't leave the U.S. due to the court having taken his passport. However, a man named Mitchell Nelson had no such restrictions. Traveling under an entirely different identity, Mitchell boarded a first-class flight to Mexico City, seated beside Julia. Once there, they continued on to Ecuador. 2 days later, Greg and Samantha Cooper arrived at their luxurious hacienda on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. Living in one of the largest homes in the small village, Greg and Sam quickly became well-known and well-liked members of the community. Wealthy and generous, they frequently hosted gatherings at their hacienda or the local cantina, where they entertained guests and made friends with the locals. Greg, ever the businessman, continued to play the stock markets, even helping some of the locals set up investment accounts and teaching them about managing their finances. The couple led a peaceful and prosperous life, filled with love and surrounded by family and friends who occasionally visited from the U.S., including Howard and Cheryl. As for the judge, who had once been so harsh on Mitchell, Marie Matthews eventually met her own fall from grace. A few years after Mitchell and Julia settled in Costa Rica, news reached them that Judge Matthews had been caught cheating on her spouse. The same judge who had adopted her wife's 3 children after their marriage was now paying child support, alimony, and house payments to her ex-wife. It seemed karma had come full circle, much to Mitchell's amusement. And so, Mitchell, now Greg, continued to thrive, having escaped his past life, leaving behind a trail of clever moves, legal maneuvers, and a story that would one day become legend. For the sake of anonymity, I'll use fake names throughout this post. My wife, Kara, 29F, and I were married for 3 wonderful years. When we first met, I never imagined I'd want to spend the rest of my life with anyone else but her. From the moment I laid eyes on her, I felt an undeniable certainty. It was like my heart knew before my mind did. There was just something about her that made me feel like she was the one. Even my pulse raced as I walked up to introduce myself for the first time. It all started at a mutual friend's birthday party, one I hadn't even planned on attending. I was dragged there by my buddy, who refused to let me spend another Friday night working late. Kara was sitting with a group of her friends, and they were all laughing, chatting, and having a good time. The atmosphere was lively. Drinks were flowing, and it was clear people were ready for a long night of celebration. I, on the other hand, nursed a single drink because I had an early morning at the office the next day. Now, I've always been a bit on the shy side, especially around women as stunning as Kara. My friend noticed that I couldn't take my eyes off her from the moment we arrived. He didn't waste any time. Without even asking me, he ordered the waiter to send an expensive bottle of champagne over to her table and told the server to say it was from me. When the bottle arrived, every one of her friends turned in my direction and smiled, which honestly made me feel like I was under a spotlight. Kara looked directly at me, raised her glass, and mouthed a thank you with a soft, graceful smile. I was nervous, but my friend wasn't going to let me off the hook. He practically dragged me over to her table, saying that it was now or never. He knew I had been single for over 4 years and was determined that this was my chance. After what felt like an eternity of persuading and gathering my courage, I walked over and asked if we could talk for a moment. Her friends kindly excused themselves, and Kara and I sat at a quieter table. We didn't talk much that night, mostly because I was completely awestruck by her beauty. Honestly, it had been so long since I had spoken to a woman in a context that wasn't work-related. I had forgotten what it felt like. At the time, I was a programmer at a major tech firm, and my life revolved around work. Socializing, especially with women, had taken a back seat for a long time. As we introduced ourselves, I found out Kara was working on her PhD. Even though we didn't talk extensively, I couldn't help but feel mesmerized by her intelligence. She was sharp, witty, and articulate. Her words seemed to flow effortlessly, and I found myself hanging on to every syllable. Before I left the party, we exchanged phone numbers. I didn't stay too late, though. I had to be up early for work, and I didn't want to ruin my chance with Kara by being too eager. A week later, we had our first official date. Both of us had been swamped with work and other commitments, but when we finally met up, it was even better than I had hoped. We spent hours talking about everything, our goals, our lives, our dreams. I was captivated by how free-spirited she was. Her laughter was contagious, and she had this effortless joy about her that made the time fly by. As the weeks passed, we grew closer and closer. Kara was always on my mind. Every night, I'd lay in bed thinking about her, imagining what it would be like to spend my life by her side. I took her shopping, brought her flowers, and did everything I could to show her how much she meant to me. I could tell she felt the same way, even though neither of us had spoken the words aloud. Eventually, I asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said yes without hesitation. Money was never an issue for me. I had a stable job and earned well, but more than anything, I loved spoiling Kara. Seeing her happy was my happiness. After 13 months of dating, we got married. Kara had always dreamed of a beach wedding, so that's exactly what we did. It was a small, intimate ceremony because we decided to use most of our wedding budget for an amazing honeymoon. It was perfect. The first 2 years of our marriage were everything I could have ever hoped for. Kara and I were inseparable. We did everything together. I wouldn't eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner unless it was with her. We made time for each other every day, whether it was grabbing lunch near her office or waiting for her to come home so we could share dinner together. We had this little ritual of going to bed early so we could talk about our day, share random thoughts, and just enjoy each other's company before drifting off to sleep. During our first year of marriage, I got promoted to senior programmer at the company I worked for, and my job became fully remote. Kara, on the other hand, completed her PhD and started working full-time as a writer and editor at a publishing company. It was a busy but fulfilling time for both of us. However, things took a turn in our 3rd year of marriage. Kara's publishing company started downsizing, and unfortunately, she was laid off. Losing her job hit her hard. She had poured so much into her work, and the sudden unemployment took a toll on her emotionally. Slowly, she started withdrawing from the things we used to love doing together. We no longer had our weekend cooking sessions, and her once vibrant personality became a shadow of what it used to be. It was painful to watch her go through that, especially since I knew how much she loved her job. I tried everything to cheer her up. I even offered to match her previous salary just to give her some peace of mind, but it didn't help. The joy that once defined our relationship was slowly slipping away. As I reflect on everything that's happened, I realize how fragile even the strongest bonds can be when life throws unexpected challenges your way. Watching Kara lose herself in her sadness has been heartbreaking, and I hope we can find a way back to each other before it's too late. Kara had always been passionate about her work at the publishing company. She once told me she wasn't there for the money. It had always been her dream to be an editor at that specific organization. Despite balancing life between our home and visiting her parents, Kara wasn't herself. I grew more concerned as the days passed, noticing her vibrant, cheerful spirit slowly fading. It wasn't until a friend of mine suggested she see a therapist that we began to see any real changes. Slowly but surely, Kara started to come back to life. She was seeing her therapist 3 times a week, but I was so impressed with the improvement that I insisted she go 4 times. I wanted her to return to the person she had been, the lively, energetic woman I had fallen in love with. Little did I know something else was developing between her and her therapist. One day, I decided to surprise Kara by cleaning the house while she was visiting her parents. I wanted her to come home to a clean, welcoming space. I even went grocery shopping to make her favorite meal and bought scented candles to set the mood for a special dinner. After cooking, I began tidying up the house, starting with our bedroom. While folding clothes in the wardrobe, I stumbled upon a small journal tucked beneath a pile of clothing. It had the logo of her therapist's office on it, and although I knew it wasn't right, curiosity got the best of me. I started reading. To my absolute shock, I discovered that Kara had been having an affair with her therapist. She had written down every detail, how it started, how it progressed, and even how she felt about him. The most painful part? She wrote about how much better he was in bed compared to me. I was devastated. I read through the journal again, hoping I had misunderstood, but there it was, clear as day. Kara had betrayed me, and she wasn't even sorry about it. I cried like a child that day, lying on our bed for hours, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal. Everything I had planned for us, our future, our life together, was shattered in an instant. When the initial shock wore off, anger replaced my heartbreak. I wanted both Kara and her therapist to pay for the hurt they caused me. I took pictures of the journal pages and filed a complaint with the therapist's office. When I went there in person, I brought the journal with me, just in case they doubted my story. The staff was horrified when they saw the contents, and the therapist's license was revoked. Later that evening, Kara came home. I told her I had stopped by her therapist's office, and she looked confused. When she asked why, I tossed the journal onto the table. She immediately broke down, crying and begging for forgiveness. But I couldn't bring myself to listen. The words I had read were burned into my mind, and the damage was irreversible. I told her to leave, threw her belongings onto the porch, and called her parents to come pick her up. She was too ashamed to move. In a final act of revenge, I photocopied the pages of her journal and sent them to her grandmother, who had always been fond of me. Her grandmother was so disappointed that Kara was cut out of her will. Her parents pleaded with me not to tell her, but I was determined to make her feel the same hurt I had experienced. We divorced soon after, and thankfully we didn't have any children, which made it easier for me to move on. Kara's life spiraled downward after our split. She became even more depressed, consumed by the shame and disappointment from her family. She called me multiple times, begging for another chance, but I refused to speak to her. I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. The last time Kara showed up at the house, she saw me with another woman. In a fit of rage, she attacked her. I was furious and called the police. After that incident, I filed for a restraining order, and that was the last time I saw Kara. The woman she attacked? We eventually broke up because I was still too hurt from everything that had happened. I hadn't fully healed yet, but I was making progress. Looking back, I realized my reaction to Kara's infidelity was extreme. Reading her private journal and using it as a tool for revenge wasn't just unethical, it was damaging to everyone involved. In hindsight, I should have sought professional help to cope with my emotions and make rational decisions. While I believed I was justified in my actions at the time, it only prolonged the pain for both of us. Now, as I continue healing, I can see that moving on with grace would have been the better path.